I want to welcome everybody to the live stream. I want to thank everybody for coming to the live stream. And today I'm going to be talking about the ISIS series and all the ideas and concepts I had when I created the ISIS character. So for this live stream, this is what the topic of the whole live stream is going to be all about. And I'm going to start going in depth in a minute. Just want to start letting everybody on social media know that I'm on the air right now. And we're getting ready to get started in this. And salute D-Rock fan. Good morning, Leah. But what inspired me to do the ISIS series was something way back in 1999. Now, back in 1999, when I was sitting at the dinner table with my brother and sister one Sunday afternoon, we were talking about superheroes, and my sister tells me that there aren't that many Black female superheroes. And after I did some research, I had to agree with her because the only Black superheroes I knew of at the time, back in 1999, was the X-Men Storm, Vixen from DC Comics, and Rocket from Milestone Media. And when I looked at the number of Black heroines, it was small in proportion to the number of Black male heroes. And I thought to myself, why aren't there many Black heroes out there? What's up, Nightwing? That's what I was thinking of when I started thinking about creating the ISIS character, because I said there's a big void here. There aren't that many Black heroines in comic books, so I wanted to go out here and create one because of the shortage, and because one of the glaring holes of Milestone Media back in the 90s was we got Hardware, Icon, Static, and the Blood Syndicate, and we also got Zombie and Cobalt, but we never got an ongoing featuring a Black heroine. And I found that to be quite troubling, that Milestone went out of its way to create all of these Black heroes, but then they didn't go and create a solo book featuring a heroine. And 1999 was also the time where we had all the bad girls going on in comics. You had the Witchblades, you had the Purgatories, you had the Lady Deaths going on. And some of that was part of the influence on me as well. And I looked at it and I wanted to create a heroine who was attractive, but also had these great powers. And that's where I got the part of the foundation for the character. I remember one night I had this, one morning I was having this dream about this woman named Isis. And that's where I really started to really get inspired to do it, because I said, I want to do a heroine, so I'm going to do a heroine based on the Egyptian gods, and then the heroine's going to be based in Egyptian mythology. So I wanted to create this heroine who was a black woman, but she came as a descendant of the Egyptian gods. And that's where I got the idea for the whole Daughter of Osiris thing. And as I was getting the idea for the whole Daughter of Osiris thing, that's when I did my first character concept sketch. And this was the first character concept sketch I ever did of the ISIS character way back in 98, 99 on scrap paper. And that's where I got the idea from. In the original ISIS concept, she was going to be wearing a Black costume, but I decided not to go with the Black costume because there was another sketch of the Black costumed ISIS, but I decided not to go with that because I saw Matrix, I saw Batman Beyond, and I said there was just and X-Men was coming out about a year later as I was writing the book, and I said there's just too many Black costumes. So this, again, another sketch that I did next to an Osiris concept sketch, but I just decided not to go with the Black costume because the Black costumes were just they had been doing them too much, and I said, it's just too many. So I decided to go and give the Isis character the iconic white costume that you see right there. And I have a concept sketch that I did of the white costume back from 99, 2000, I believe. That's an Eastian concept sketch. It's in here. Because this is where I keep all my concept art. And I still have it from 99, 2000. This was the first white costume Isis concept sketch I did a while back in 99. So I came up with the white costume, and I decided to go with that when I was writing the book. So I thought, give her the white costume so that she could pop visually, and the design could really stand out. And as I was coming up with the concept, I said I wanted to, again, do the daughter of Osiris. I wanted to, good evening, Gabriel. I wanted to make it entrenched in the Egyptian mythology, and I wanted to make her a descendant of the Egyptian gods. So I decided that she wouldn't come from Egypt, she would actually come from Nubia, and that would be the thing that would make her distinct, because Horus is the son of Egypt as I saw it, and Isis would be the daughter of Nubia, and she would be this goddess of retribution because she'd be born after the Roman Empire. Leah, you can get the Isis books and the Isis series. You can get them all on Amazon.com. So all the books are on Amazon.com. And they are all and you can get them by, hold on, I'm having technical, let me see what I can do here. I get this. You can get them on Amazon.com, and there are about, I'd say about 15 Isis series books that I've done over the years. So you can get them. It's because the Isis series starts with Trial of the Goddess, which is the first book in the storyline, but I published this in 2008. And that's followed up with the first Isis, which I published back in 2002. The story of Isis, the modern one that starts after the Temptation of John Haynes, starts with Amari's Revenge, and this came out in 2012. And that follows with the Ultimate Fight, which features Isis, where she's taking on the Greek goddess Nemesis. And there's the Beauty Myth, My Sister, My Frenemy, All About the Goddess, which is a mystery. Wrath of the Cyber Goddess, which features Bill Walko's first cover, and Power of the Princess. Night of the Vampires, which features another Bill Walko cover. Bride of Dracula, which is a follow-up to Night of the Vampires. Samurai Goddess, where she takes on Kung Fu killers. And Escape from Transylvania, which features one of my favorite Bill Walko covers. And All That Glitters, which is now available in paperback. This is the newest Isis series book. And this is Imitation of Life, which is part of Fantasy Flashback Falls. So all of these books are part of the Isis series. And again, what inspired me again was that conversation I had with my brother and sister at the dinner table, where we talked about the lack of Black heroines in comic books. And as we were talking, I said to myself, they were right that there weren't that many Black heroines in comics, because again, Samurai Goddess is very interesting, Gabriel. It's a story that's partially inspired by NYPD Blue, and it's a little bit inspired by Pulp Fiction, and has a lot of martial arts action. But in 1999, that's what we were talking about. And as I was thinking about what she was saying, I said to myself, yeah, glad you're here, Supremo. Glad to see you here at the stream. But in 1999, that's what I was thinking about. And that's where I got the ideas for the character foundation of Isis. So I wanted the character, again, to be this sister who came from Nubia, and I wanted the character to be this goddess who was supposed to be the goddess of retribution, who was supposed to bring Egypt and Nubia together as one nation under the gods. And that's what the character's original destiny was supposed to be, because Osiris wanted to have this son who would go out and be this god of retribution, who would bring the Egypt and Nubia together. But that destiny was never fulfilled because he had a daughter, and a daughter would live a completely different life than a son. Now, Isis is the daughter of Osiris from a Nubian servant, and as she grew up in this household with the prince and the king, she was taught how to serve people, and her destiny got derailed by Princess Amari at the time, and I talk about that in depth in Amari's Revenge. Now, that's where I talk about Isis's destiny getting completely derailed, and she didn't get to fulfill that destiny as the goddess of retribution, partially due to this Amari being jealous of Isis and then trying to kill Isis in that story. And her destiny also got derailed as a result of her being born female, and that's where she wound up, wandering for over 1,000 years. And she eventually wound up in Japan, where she learned martial arts, and then she eventually wound up in America, and that's where that's where everything starts with the Isis character in the first Isis book I published back in 2002. Now, in 2002, when I published this book, I was down to my last $600 from my AmeriCorps Vista position, and I decided, after trying to submit this book to publishers, it wasn't going anywhere. I decided to just publish it myself. So I took it to a print-on-demand publishing company, and I took $200 and published it. And from there, I just went on. That's how I started my publishing career. Now, this cover, if you want to know, that art you see in the background of many of my videos, this was actually, this cover was in this art is the original cover art. So if you see this in my videos, this is the original cover art for this book. And the Ankh symbol that you see on that cover and on Isis's necklace, that was inspired by Batman Beyond, because I loved Batman Beyond back in the day. And that was another thing that inspired the whole Isis concept in the concept stages, was Batman Beyond, because I came up with part of the idea from Batman Beyond, because Batman Beyond was about Batman in the future, and it was about the Bruce Wayne being an older man and passing his torch to the next generation. So what I wanted to do with this was talk about how the Egyptian gods were in the future and how things had changed over time. And that was one of the things that I got influence from, was Batman Beyond. The other thing that I got influence from was DC Comics Kingdom Come. Now, DC Comics Kingdom Come, this was a milestone book back in the late 90s. This was a book that really, it was major influential to many comic creators, and it was very influential to myself as I was creating the whole Isis concept. I was sitting there saying to myself, Kingdom Come, it showed us how one generation of heroes had really messed up and did not pass their values on to the next generation of heroes, and those heroes wound up becoming wayward and misguided. And that was something that really was an influence to me when I was writing Isis, because I thought about things as related to the Black community, because when it comes down to the Black community, we had one generation that got wayward and lost, which was the civil rights generation. And because they didn't teach the culture to the next generation, that generation really got lost. And that was part of the commentary I was trying to make with the first Isis book, was how that one generation that got derailed wound up leading to the next generation getting derailed. Because that's what I saw with the whole myth of Isis, Osiris, and Seth. I saw how one generation getting derailed can have an impact on the next generation, because with that second generation of gods, which was the one that Isis, Osiris, and Seth came from, I could see I sort of parallel between them and the civil rights generation, which got caught up in white acceptance and white approval. And instead of them thinking about, getting equal opportunity and building an economic platform, they got caught up in social acceptance, because that's how you had the black women who wanted to be a part of the feminist movement. And then you had the black men who, some of them, they were trying to stay on course, but they couldn't stay on course due to the establishment of the welfare state. So that's one of the things that led to part of the commentary. And thank you, D-Rock fan. And thank you, Gabriel. Gabriel was talking about the background of all my Marvel Legends. Those were given to me by a family member to help me keep up hope when I was out of work. So he used to buy me action figures and stuff. So, thank you, Leah. But the ISIS series is 15 books. And again, 15 going on 16. I still have to write. I'm still trying to write more of them. But those were some of the things I wanted to make a commentary on in the first ISIS book, was talking about how that generation had gotten lost. And that was, again, something that was one of the influences I got from Kingdom Come, was how instead of the heroes learning values from their fathers and their mothers, everybody just went wayward, and we just had total anarchy, because the heroes just, they didn't do a great job. And Superman, because he was the icon, when he had walked away, everything just fell completely apart. Now, I have an issue with that part of Superman walking away and everything falling apart, because I don't really agree with that. But I could understand what they were trying to say, because he was like a patriarchal figure. And as a patriarchal figure, yes, Moshe, Isis has a lot of adventures under her belt, because I get a lot of inspiration to write the character, and I get a lot of different ideas. And sometimes I want to make commentary on different things. So that's why I write so many books. So that's one of the things I do. But again, with Kingdom Come, it was a major influence on it, because I thought about, again, the black community. I thought about the future of the black community, because with the generation that came up with Horus and Esteem and Isis, that's what the commentary I wanted to make was, these were the children who did not get the guidance that the way that they should. Some of them got it, like Horus got it towards the end, and Anubis got it towards the end. They finally got to meet their father. But Esteem, she got misguided by Seth, and she wound up completely lost. And then Isis never got to know her father. And that was one of the things that I really wanted to go in depth on, because when it came down to black heroines, no one ever really wanted to really explore the whole concept of black women and their father issues. So that was something I wanted to go in depth talking about in the first ISIS book, was talking about black women and their fathers, because a lot of black women, one of the reasons why they are having such a hard time in life is because they didn't have that relationship with their father, and they think their father is this bad guy, and they think that because their father is a bad guy, they start to think that all men are bad guys, because they didn't get that love from their father. So with this first ISIS book that I wrote, back in 1999, I really wanted to make a commentary on fathers, and I wanted to partially start explaining why a lot of fathers were not in their children's lives, because this is the part of the story that a lot of girls don't get. They don't really get why their father left, and they don't get that. Knowledgeable Queen Kier, good morning. And Gabriel, yeah, I had a lot. That's one of the reasons why I had a lot of toys, and I'm glad you had a great Spawn collection. I'm reading some of them more. Yeah, Roz, I will be doing more readings in the future. I plan to do one as a whole live stream. But what I wanted to do was talk about the role of the father, because a lot of times, a lot of girls, a lot of black girls, they were told all these bad things about their fathers. They were told all of these negative things about their father, how they had a no good daddy and how their father was no good. And I wanted to use the Isis character to make a commentary on the father and why he couldn't be there. And I made that commentary partially in the story by saying that Osiris wanted to be in his daughter's life, but because the Heliopolitan War was going on, he couldn't be there, and he didn't want Seth to find her. So that was the reasons why he couldn't be in her life. But he felt bad. He wanted to be in his daughter's life. He wanted to be a part of his life, and he wanted to also heal the rift between himself and Esteem, who had gotten corrupted by Seth, who told her a lie and told her that she couldn't be this high priestess that she aspired to be, because Esteem aspired to be this high priestess in the Egyptian kingdom. And she was a princess at the time. She had been adopted. She thought she could be this high priestess. She worked hard to get this job to become a high priestess. She trained every day. And Seth told her this lie. He took on Osiris's form. He told her this lie. And with the Esteem character, I wanted to make a commentary on how one thing that somebody says can literally destroy a girl. And what happened with the Esteem character is, because she was so scarred, she became this demon. And that's what the whole demonic image of Esteem comes from. It comes from the whole thing as related to father issues. And it comes from the whole concept of black female self-hatred. And that's one of the reasons why the Esteem character in her demon form wears her hair over her face like this, where she covers up one of her eyes, because she thinks she's ugly. She's a very beautiful woman, but she doesn't see herself as beautiful because of the damage that was done due to Seth telling her the lie that she couldn't be this high priestess. And then he told her about her real heritage. And she thought because all of her people were extinct and she couldn't be a part of the Egyptian kingdom, she couldn't be human. So she decided to just decide to be this monster, because she felt like she didn't belong with anything. And that's something a lot of black girls get. They feel like they don't belong. They feel like they're not going to get accepted, and they have this deep self-hatred. And that's what the whole image of Esteem as a demon is supposed to represent, is all of the daddy issues that a lot of girls go through. But Isis and Esteem, they both went through those daddy issues, and that was part of their story, was the daddy issues that they have. And in the first Isis, we really start to see Isis's anger and frustration as a result of her having to deal with this relationship with a father she never knew, and having to try to reconcile that relationship in the first Isis. And that was something that was, again, I wanted to really touch on, because as I related to a lot of black comics, when I was looking at, again, Milestone's Rocket, they didn't really do a good job. It's a great comic, but they didn't really do a good job of exploring Raquel's father and exploring the relationship between her mother and her father. They just made it where she was just a single mother in the projects. And I thought they could have dug a little bit deeper. Yeah, I was at the Schomburg Center in Harlem, and I can give you an email when I can give you an email. It's called SJ. I'll just give you an email. You can email me at there. But I was at the Schomburg Center for their comic book festival last week. There's a vlog of it. I didn't stay that long, but I stayed long enough, and I picked up some books, and I'm hoping to be there with the Isis series next year. But the whole thing with the Isis character, again, her foundation, the whole thing is that I wanted to talk about the fathers, and I wanted to talk about how the impact of fathers has on daughters, because we often in the Black community we would talk about the impact of fatherlessness on sons, but we really need to understand that daughters deal with these daddy issues as well. And these daddy issues, again, are one of the core reasons why a lot of Black girls have a hard time having relationships. And Isis struggles with that in the first Isis book, where she has to deal with male authority. She has to deal with submitting to male authority. And she struggles. Yes, that's Songbird in the background. It's a Marvel Legends Songbird. There's a whole bunch of Marvel Legends in the background. Okay. But okay, Paula, I'll get in touch with them, or you can get in touch with me. But the daddy issues, they have a major impact on girls, and I saw it in comics. It wasn't really being explored because I originally, again, wanted Isis to be a comic book. I wanted it to be this comic back in the 90s, but I didn't have that much money, so I was just writing stuff and sketching stuff, and eventually the comic book industry wasn't in good shape. So I had to learn about publishing, not from comics where I wanted to originally be, but I learned it from trade publishing, and I learned how to publish that way. And then I tried to submit Isis to several publishers. It didn't go through, but eventually I went to a POD company and I published it that way. And that was the foundation of it. I started again with Isis in 2002. And in the back matter, I talked about how I wanted to do an Isis series, but due to my employment issues where I haven't been able to find full-time work, I wasn't able to start doing more books in the series. I can give you some points on writing a Black hero, Devon, but I'm going to go in depth on it a little bit later in the live stream. But with the Isis character, she had her foundation in 2002, but I had financial problems until about 2008. I remember, again, I was living on where a family member was giving me $60 a month, and I had all these manuscripts sitting there, and I originally was going to do, again, Amari's Revenge back then, but I just didn't have the story ideas or the concepts then. So I had gone through things and I had done other books and other stories. I did a book called Cassandra Cookbook in the hopes of getting a more commercial story out there, but it just didn't pan out. But then in 2008, I was able to finally get my first couple of books out. And then eventually I started SJS Direct in 2009. And after I started SJS Direct, that's when I decided to resurrect the Isis series soon after I published The Temptation of John Haynes. Now, this is an essential book if you're going to be into before you start the Isis series, because this one establishes the foundation for the character. The Eastine character, in this story, her character transformation arc lays the foundation. Thank you, Rosbud. I appreciate everything people do for me. I appreciate every contribution you guys give me, every donation you give me, whether it be PayPal, Patreon, or here in the super chats. I really appreciate everything you do for me. And because every dollar you use, I try to use to go out here and put quality covers on the books. And I'm hoping to eventually this year fund the Isis Indiegogo and give you the Isis comic book I originally planned, because I'm planning on doing an Isis graphic novel, and I want to give you the Isis graphic novel I originally planned to do way back in 1999. But I just couldn't bring the Isis character back from this 1999 story and 2002 story when it was published, because this story was set in 1883, and I didn't want to just pick up in 1883. So I decided to bring the character to modern times, because I had just gotten through doing Temptation of John Haynes in 2011. And in 2012, it was the 10th anniversary of the Isis character, and I decided I would use the Temptation of John Haynes as a springboard to bring the Isis character back. Now, the Isis character is mentioned in the Temptation of John Haynes, and I opened the door for the Isis character to come in the final chapters of the Temptation of John Haynes, where Eastine looks up at the sky and talks about Osiris knowing where to find me. So that's similar to what they did in the MCU when you saw the Thor hammer in the ground, where they said we found it. But I did this back in 2011, where she just looks up the sky, and I wrote this story back in 2005, so where she looks up at the sky and says, "He knows where to find me," and that's the springboard for Amari's Revenge. Now, Amari's Revenge is the first book in the modern ISIS series, which takes place at the exact same time as The Temptation of John Haynes. In fact, it takes place a few months after The Temptation of John Haynes. So this is the first book in the ISIS series, and it lays the foundation for the ISIS character in these modern times. This is the book that establishes everything for the character, and it brings us up to date from the past up to the future. And this is the book that is what I would consider to be the entry point for the character. Now, readers, they will just go out here and pick up whatever books they want, because I write the books to be very accessible. But this is the book that starts the whole series. Oh, I remember Worlds Collide, Gabriel. I have all those comics. I even still have the stickers. So I have them. They're in one of my boxes that I have my comics in. Worlds Collide was a DC Comics event between the Milestone universe and the DC universe. It was between the Milestone and the Superman family, and it was one of the big events of Milestone Comics. It was actually one of the better events of Milestone Comics. I remember all two or three of them. One was the Shadow War. That one was really good. Then there was Worlds Collide. The last one, Long Hot Summer, I was not a fan of. That one had hints of SJW Marvel to it, but that one, well, the other ones were great, and I would highly recommend them. But I just like Green Lantern. I mean, my Green Lantern was Kyle Rayner back in the day. I still have a lot of the Kyle Rayner books. I have one in the box somewhere. But I haven't discussed Isis's powers yet, because she has two sets of powers. The powers she has in the first book are completely different than the powers she has in Amari's Revenge, because in the first Isis, she is stripped of her powers, but her original powers were just basically, she just had super strength and super speed. But after she was redeemed after the events of Isis, she got brand new powers from the Elder Gods, which were Ra, Shu, and Tennefoot, and the Elder Gods, and those powers included flight, teleportation, invulnerability. She still had invulnerability back in the day, but she had more invulnerability. She has cloaking, where she can turn invisible, and she has enhanced hearing and enhanced reflexes. So she has a plethora of powers. She has flight, superhuman strength, superhuman speed, superhuman stamina, teleportation, cloaking, and she also has great martial arts skills. Now, her other thing that she learned, because she lived 800 years in Japan, was she learned numerous martial arts. So her fighting style is very, very unique. She doesn't just use superpowers. She also uses martial arts abilities. So that's one of Isis's things. She has a more of a fast-paced kung fu style when she's doing fist fights, but she doesn't have like a ground and pound style. Eastine has a completely different style than Isis does. So that's how her powers work. And in Imitation of Life, we get, where we see her in the 30s, we get a look at her new abilities and her trying to deal with racism back then. So we get to see her. This is the first book where we see her powers, and this book we also see her powers as well. But that was the base of her powers overall. And with the whole Isis character, as I brought her into The Temptation of John Haynes, from The Temptation of John Haynes, what I wanted to do with the character was create another concept. Now, back a couple of years ago, back in 2012, I wrote a blog called If Sean Wrote DC Comics Wonder Woman, and that laid the foundation. That was like the outline for what I wanted to do with the modern Isis series. So with that blog, I wrote about Wonder Woman. That Wonder Woman blog, I laid the foundation for what I wanted to do with the Isis character. I sat there and I had wrote this blog out talking about what I would do if I was writing the Wonder Woman character because I had a very strong background writing heroines. I had gotten a lot of critical acclaim on two heroines I had written. One was the character of Cassandra Lee. The other one was a character called Marilyn Marie in a screenplay I'd written called All About Marilyn. And people always talked about how I had written some great, strong heroines. And in the outline, I talked about, how the world had changed and how William Moulton Marston's character, who was supposed to represent this strong woman, who was supposed to be the equal of a man, was considered really obsolete when you consider today, because in today's world, there are numerous women out here who are the equal of Diana on many levels, and many of them don't have the best interests of men and women at heart. Because at the time when I was writing this back in 2012, I thought about all the women out here, like your Carly Fiorinas, your Serena Williams, your Mickey James. There were so many women out here who were out here competing on another level. And I said to myself, Wonder Woman is looking more and more like a pretty face. So what I wanted to do in my proposed run for the comic was redefine the character for the 21st century and design her so that we can see what makes her stand out as a heroine in a gynocentric and post-feminist world filled with all these powerful women, and all these women who, again, just don't have the best interests of men at heart. So what I wanted to do with the character was just show how Wonder Woman was important to women of today, because when it comes down to the character, she's just not relatable for many people, because they look at the whole concept of the strong woman. And while Wonder Woman was the archetype for that, the whole foundation of the character is just, compared to today's women, just not considered relatable to many women these days. They look at her and they compare her to Xena, and that's not what I wanted to see, for a model for a strong heroine. Now, as I was sitting there and I was writing that blog, people were telling me this blog is great and that they would go out and buy all those books. So I sat there and said to myself, why should I go out here and, lay a foundation for a character that I don't own and don't control when I already created a heroine already in the Isis character? So I sat there and I said to myself, I have an outline here for a character back in 2012, because back then that's one of the things that I did along with these two commissions in the background by Terry Beatty. I did that to celebrate the 10th anniversary of Isis. And I sat there, I said to myself, why should I go out here and write a proposal for Wonder Woman when I've already created my own heroine, and I can go and tell those stories? And those stories, I would own those stories. I would own the rights to those stories, and I would own the rights to the character. So that was one of the things that really motivated me to go out here and write the Isis stories. Now, the first two stories in the Isis series, Isis Amari's Revenge and Isis The Ultimate Fight, they were both part of my proposed Wonder Woman run, and Ultimate Fight was really part of my Wonder Woman run. This was the story that I originally proposed as an idea for Wonder Woman. But I said to myself, why should I go out here and write these stories that I'm not going to get paid for and waste my time with that, when I have a perfectly good character that I created myself, created a foundation for, and created a concept for, and I could write those stories myself, and I could then make money on my own character and build my own platform with my own character. Now, Amari's Revenge, this was just to get you caught up on the character and let you know what she was doing, while the Temptation of John Haynes was going on, a couple of months after the Temptation of John Haynes, and let you know what the character was doing, just to introduce you to the character, let you get to know her, and then let you know about the things that really derailed her destiny in depth. So that's what this book was all about. It's the entry point. The second book, The Ultimate Fight, this is Isis coming back to the world and her getting ready to, again, she meets with her friend Doc Flowers, and they're talking about her going back to teaching because Isis was a teacher, and that's a homage to the old Secrets of Isis filmation series, which featured Joanna Cameron. And one of the other homages I do with that series is I talk in her past identity, which was Andrea Thomas Robinson, because the original Isis from DC Comics, her secret identity was Andrea Thomas. So that was the other thing that I pay a homage to. But in Ultimate Fight, I wanted to go and show you what Isis getting ready to try to start her life over as this teacher. And she runs afoul of Nemesis, who is this Greek goddess. And Nemesis in this story, she's really frustrated, and she doesn't want to be the goddess of retribution because she's so frustrated regarding the way humans are. So she takes to a point where she's beating up people in this octagon and having these ultimate fights where she's just beating people up. And Hermes, after beating up a character that was inspired by Gina Carano, Hermes tells her about Isis, who was a skilled fighter, and Nemesis challenges Isis to an ultimate fight. And that's where I got the concept for the story, because I said, you have Wonder Woman, who is supposed to be one of the world's greatest warriors, yet nobody wants to do a story talking about the UFC or ultimate fighting and have a villain based in ultimate fighting. And I said, that's ridiculous that they haven't done this, because UFC is huge and UFC makes billions of dollars, but we don't have a Wonder Woman story featuring UFC. And I said to myself, if they won't do that story, I'll write that story. And I wrote this story, again, Ultimate Fight, which was about Nemesis, Greek goddess of retribution, who is Isis's Greek counterpart, picking a fight with Isis. And in between the pages of the story about the Ultimate Fight, I make a really fun commentary about bullying, because the Nemesis character comes across as a bit of a bully, and she goes out of her way to bully the Isis character into this fight. And then eventually Isis winds up beating her in the fight. And it leads to long-term ramifications which affect the character in a future story, which I'm going to talk about in a few minutes. Now, the story I did after that was called The Beauty Myth. And this was a story that really got a lot of feminists mad. A lot of feminists, when they saw this story, they got mad about it because I used the title from the book from Naomi Wolf. And that was one of the things that inspired the book, because my sister had read this beauty myth back in high school, and I read it afterwards. And what I wanted to do was talking about, beauty, self-image, and self-worth in the story, as I was doing the story where the Isis is having a hard time dealing with conventional beauty, and she's also trying to deal with the trust issue she has with her estranged sister, Eastine. So in this story, she's kidnapped by this black cosmetics owner, Rahima Sanders, who wants to find out her beauty secrets. Now, the Rahima character, she was inspired by Ebony Fashion Fair, because back during Jim Crow, they did not have really cosmetic lines for black women that were mainstream. So Ebony went out of its way to create this Fashion Fair cosmetics. And they also did modeling shows, which were featuring the beautiful black women. And Rahima Sanders, she was one of the women who was out during the 50s, and she wanted to aspire to be beautiful like she was in the 50s. And she wants to turn back the clock on her youth. And when she finds out that Isis is 2,000 years old and Eastine is 4,000 years old, she decides to find a way to bait Isis into coming into the store back for more stuff. So that's what leads to her getting kidnapped, and it leads to one of the most powerful climaxes in the Isis series. So this is, again, a powerful story. I mean, you have to pick up Beauty Myth. This isn't the actual cover. This was a concept one, but I couldn't really get the art down back in the day. So that's why you see these hand-drawn covers. But the Beauty Myth had a very powerful story about beauty, self-image, and self-worth. And that's another thing that black girls struggle with, is the standard of beauty and trying to be and to see their self-image and self-worth. And that was something I wanted to explore in Isis, the Beauty Myth. So this was a story that is one of the major stories in the ISIS series. A lot of people, again, they ridiculed me. A feminist got mad and they put it on a lousy book cover list, but I didn't have the money at the time to hire Bill Walko, so this was the best I could do at the time. But the story was very powerful, and a lot of people, after they read the story, they realized how powerful it was. Now, after I did the beauty myth, where I talked about ISIS's beauty secrets, and I talked about self-image, and I talked about self-worth, I then followed up one of the ramifications of Ultimate Fight with My Sister, My Frenemy. Now, this is a build-up. This story pays off these other two stories and Amari's Revenge. This is the story that pays off all three of these books, where the tension between ISIS and Eastine, reaches the boiling point, where ISIS gets rejected for that teaching job that she wanted. And because she got rejected for the teaching job, what happened was she got upset and she snaps at Eastine, and then after that we have this confrontation again between ISIS and Eastine, and then it leads to Eastine going out, and then they work things out. They run into the demon Delilah, and then she realizes how much she needs to value her sister after she sees Delilah belittling Eastine. Now, Delilah is the villain from the Eastine series. She's Eastine's major arch enemy, but she makes an appearance in this story to teach ISIS a lesson about why she needs to value her sister and how much her sister cares about her. And this is a book that, again, is essential reading because it pays off the other three books. And that's something I learned from comic book writing, is that when you set something up, you really have to pay it off. So if you have people coming in 3 books in, you have to pay it off with the conclusion. And this pays off the subplot that was built. This book pays off the subplot that was setting up in these first 3 books that bring the character back and then establish her foundation and then build on the storyline. So when you're writing a story, what you want to do when you're setting up in each story is you're going to pay off the action in the main plot, but then you have the subplot, which is part of the overreaching arc. And that overreaching arc has to pay off. And this one pays off by, again, helping ISIS reconcile with Eastine and her feelings about Eastine, but it also pays off in the fact that we have them getting closer, but we also have ISIS starting to set a new direction for herself, because since she can't be a teacher like she was in the Golden Age, this is where I lay the foundation for her becoming a student. And that's the whole part of the overreaching arc of the series, is that she becomes this student who is learning about the world before she starts to interact with it. So instead of her being this goddess who is going out here to teach others, she's going to be a student. And that's going to contrast from what we saw in Imitation of Life, where she was the professor, but in the ISIS series, she's a student. And that student foundation of the first story arc is concluded in All About the Goddess. Now, All About the Goddess is a mystery. And in this mystery, we have the ISIS character helping Marilyn Marie, who is a former child star, trying to catch this stalker who's been harassing her on the next school college campus. So the reason why the character is nude on the cover is because she has to bear all in the art studio to catch this campus stalker and find out who is the one trying to make these threats against the Marilyn Marie character. Now, this book is where we start to see ISIS start to have her philosophy of going where she's needed and going out to help others. And this lays the foundation for her being further going where she's needed. And this is the book that concludes the first story arc, which is these first couple of books. So this one pays off all the books and is the end of the first ISIS series story arc. So it's these books that are a part of the first story arc. And though these are the ones that a lot of people, they don't pick these up because they don't really like the covers too much, but these are essentials for the starting the series. And this is the best selling out of all the early ISIS series books. This is the one that really pays off all the early arcs and lays the foundation for the direction of the series so far. And after I did that one, because I did this one I think in 2013, that was laying the foundation for the series. And now after I did that, I started to run into some trouble from some hoteps and some pro-blacks and some feminists. And again, they would attack me about the covers. So the thing that I decided to do after people were attacking me about the covers was, first I tried to do a Kickstarter, but then that failed. And then after that, I said that if I'm really dedicated to this, and after I read Dr. Robert Glover's No More Mr. Nice Guy, I decided to, make a sacrifice of things in my toy collection, because this isn't my complete toy collection. I sold off a lot of things in order to hire Bill Walko to design the first cover for the ISIS Wrath of the Cyber Goddess. And that's something I wanted to do because I wanted to leave a strong first impression on my readers. So with that, when I sacrificed a lot of things, including a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle pie wrapper, I decided to pay Bill Walko to design the first cover for the ISIS series. And that book was ISIS Wrath of the Cyber Goddess. Now, this is the book that features the old logo, and Bill changed the logo, and I'm really thankful for him changing the logo because it really made the covers pop. And he took an idea I had and he turned it into the first cover for ISIS Wrath of the Cyber Goddess. And this was a story that was tied directly to Isis the Beauty Myth. In fact, it follows up Isis the Beauty Myth. And this story is one that really pays off big because it really starts the feud between Isis and Rahima, but it also is the story where we get the first appearance of John Haynes in the ISIS series. So this book is like an event. So, and because a lot of people, what they would do in comics is, oh, thank you, Devon. But the Cyber Goddess was inspired partially by Vegeta from Dragon Ball Z. Her design was partially Vegeta from Dragon Ball Z, and it was also partial to DC Comics' Dr. Cyber, because one of the things that I got inspired to do with the Rahima character was from reading about Dr. Cyber and Wonder Woman, and I had these Diana Prince Wonder Woman trades that I had bought to do research on the character, because I liked the Dr. Cyber character. I liked her diva attitude and I liked her diva demeanor. And I saw some parallels between there, and I said, this was a great character. But then as I read the Diana Prince Wonder Woman books, I saw where they went wrong with her. And I looked at it and I said, when they disfigured her face and tried to make her a female Doctor Doom, this was where they made their mistake. So I saw where they were going wrong with the character, and I decided to just do something on my own. I thought with this Cyber Goddess, I could do something like Dr. Cyber and build up this villain. And because Rahima was a scientist and she's into cosmetics. And what people don't know is that cosmetics, there's a lot of science involved with it. And that was something I also explored in Beauty Myth, where I talk about the science of cosmetics and I talk about the science of beauty. And that was where Rahima got her mad scientist concept. And in her obsession with restoring her youth, she turns herself into this Cyber Goddess and then decides to go out and seek revenge on Isis. And as she and Isis are having this fight and Isis gets beat, what happens is she falls into the balcony of John Haynes's office tower. And that's what leads to us meeting John Haynes, Isis and John Haynes meeting for the first time. And that's what this book is all about. That's why I wanted to get Bill on the cover, because this was the first really big event for the Isis character. And I wanted to put a powerful cover on the book. So that's one of the things I wanted to do with the ISIS Wrath of the Cyber Goddess. And that's why I wanted to get Bill Walko to design the cover, because he does amazing art. You have to check out his Hero Business strip, because he does amazing work on that strip. And because that strip, it reminds me a lot of Dwayne McDuffie's Damage Control in the humor that's involved, because it's like a satire of superheroes, but it reminds me a lot of Damage Control. And I liked his art. It reminded me of Bruce Timm animation. It reminded me of animation, and I wanted that look for the Isis character because the character was partially inspired by Batman Beyond. So I really wanted an animated look for the character for her design. Now, with the Cyber Goddess, that's where I started really getting serious about working on the whole Isis series, and I started really thinking about, quality and quality things. I mean, there was another book that I had already finished before, and I wanted to get it out, but I just didn't have the money. And that was another follow-up to the whole Nemesis arc, which was The Power of the Princess. Now, I know this cover isn't the greatest, but I was just rushing stuff out, and I wanted to have a book out just for that year because I didn't have the money, to put it out. So I just decided to just put it out and get through with it. But this is a follow-up to the Nemesis arc. So this one, it's like the second part of the Nemesis arc. I'm getting ready to do another part, which is inspired by WWE. That's what I want to do. Is called The Main Event, which is the third story. Usually with the Isis series books, it's just like comic books. I'm doing an arc, and like each book is like a story arc, and it's like 2 to 3 issues of a comic, and then eventually it leads to an overreaching arc. So this is the second story arc of the Isis series. And again, they really like Wrath of the Cyber Goddess, and they don't really pick up Power of the Princess too much, but that Wrath of the Cyber Goddess is their entry point for a lot of people, just like All About the Gods, which is the end of the end of the first story arc. People, they come in on this one because I gave this one away for free on Smashwords for years, and they also come in on Wrath of the Cyber Goddess because it's the start of the second story arc. Now, the second story arc continues with Night of the Vampires. This is the one where we're starting to work on Isis and John Haynes's relationship, and because Eastine decides to go undercover to catch some crooks who are stealing from the company, she sends Isis to work as a temp for and assist John Haynes. And that's where he runs into these vampires who are upset about the state of Morris Phillips, the company John has been made CEO of. So this story, The Night of the Vampires, this is the story that sets up the Isis-John. It continues developing the Isis-John Haynes relationship. And this was one I did a Kickstarter for, and a brother helped me out by paying for the Kickstarter. And those donations he gave me enabled me to be able to put Bill Walko's art on this cover and for Eastine undercover. So it wasn't for the brother helping me out, I wouldn't have been able to put this art on the cover for Night of the Vampires. Now, Night of the Vampires is followed up with everybody's favorite Isis series book. I mean, this one, Bride of Dracula, this one is so popular that it's not funny. I mean, this was another story, again, I had planned to do as a Wonder Woman story, and the original idea was based on, again, from Hammer Horror Films, and it was going to be a follow-up where Isis takes on Dracula, but the whole idea I originally imagined was Wonder Woman and Batman, because John Haynes was supposed to be like the Bruce Wayne, and it's supposed to be Dracula versus Batman and Wonder Woman. So that was what originally was the concept for Bride of Dracula, but I did it with Isis and John Haynes instead, because I said, why don't I just make this money with my own characters? And that's what I did with Bride of Dracula. And it was one of the most popular books in the Isis series. It's one that a lot of people use as their entry point into the series. It's the one that people actually go out of their way to buy on the regular. And it's the entry point a lot of people use to get into the Isis series. So this was a book that I did partially with donations at cover. I paid for the cover partially with donations. And I also put a little of my own money with it because I wanted to see this great cover come on the book. Bill Walko did an amazing job on this cover. And this is the cover that everyone seems to love. This is the story everyone seems to love. And I have to wonder if we did this as a Wonder Woman comic, I wonder how many would have sold. I mean, because people just love this story for some reason. It's one of their favorites next to All About the Goddess, and it's one of their favorites overall. The other book that people seem to like is Samurai Goddess. This was a book that I did, I wrote this book in 4 days. So I wrote this one where she's taking on these kung fu killers, and I came up with this whole idea about, you know, martial arts, because I wanted to show Isis's martial arts background in depth. And I took some inspiration from Doc Savage, and I also took some from NYPD Blue. And with this one, I wanted to show Isis's martial arts background, her kung fu background. And this is one I really like because Bill Walko did, again, another amazing job on this cover. He took my absolutely horrifically bad art and he made it into this masterpiece that literally looks like an animation cell that jumps off a page. And I wouldn't have been able to do this one without the help of a donation from a sister who literally gave me the money for, oh, thank you, Supremo. I wouldn't be able to do any of these book covers without Bill Walko or the donations from people. And I've been trying to improve the quality. And as you can see, the quality, it just continues to improve with the last couple of books that, you know, we've gone from hand-drawn covers to professional covers. And again, that wouldn't be done without your help. I mean, that's why I was able to go out here and put quality covers on the books. And the quality covers, what they've done is left me with a strong first impression on the readers. So readers asked me to improve the quality, and that's what I did. Not only outside with the covers, but I also did it on the inside with the grammar, the spelling. I would sit there and do research, learning about how sentence structure works and learning how, you know, how things work so that people could get better stories. Now, I followed up the vampire arc with the third, and it's not going to be the final story because Dracula will be coming back with Escape from Transylvania. But with this one, I wanted to show how Isis and John's relationship had evolved. So with Escape from Transylvania, this is the story. Yes, Isis and John are taking on Dracula again. And what's happening is the rift between them, that it started with Cyber Goddess, where Isis wound up having to have John Haynes save her. This eventually leads to them eventually working things out. So with this story, we get to see Isis and John finally working out their issues and eventually learning how to work together. And on this cover, we get the first a look at Isis's civilian outfit. And this is what she wears when she's on the street. And this is what she wears when she's out and about. So this is the first appearance of Isis's civilian outfit, which is a part of the next story, which was Isis, House of Isis. Now, I didn't have enough money to put Bill's art on House of Isis, and I don't even have a copy of House of Isis just yet. But House of Isis was a story where I started to take a jab back at all the pro-blacks who decided to attack me over the years. And a lot of them, because a lot of these pro-blacks and these hoteps, they would sit there and they would talk about how Isis is too light-skinned, how she's not black enough, and how the character doesn't represent what they want to see in a black woman, how she doesn't have this natural hair, how she doesn't have this, she's not wearing the things. So what I wanted to do with House of Isis was really clap back at all those people and show that what makes Isis a heroine and what makes her black is on the inside and not on the outside. Because with the Priestess Anjara character, what I wanted to do was show how someone could appear to be black on the outside, but then not be true to what is black on the inside. So with that story, I show you, you know, who Isis is as a character and what makes her a hero as a character. Now, with that story, we got to see Isis taking on pro-blacks, and that was one of the fun parts of that story. And there's a fun climax in Isis, House of Isis. And if you pick the book up, you're going to get a great big laugh, because in that story, we not only see Isis, we also see her stepmother, Queen Isis, in a story arc. And the last time we saw her was in Isis, My Sister, My Frenemy. And we also saw her in, we also saw her in the first Isis and Trial of the Goddess. So in this story, we get to see Queen Isis. And Queen Isis is a character that is a major mentor to the Isis character, and she's like a mother figure to her. And that's what I wanted to do with the character in Isis House of Isis. Now, after Isis House of Isis, I decided to put out this year's new. That's funny, Nightwing. Anjara, yeah, Anjara is she's like a lot of these pro-black females who has the natural hair, and she puts on the Made in Taiwan kufi and dashiki. And she's one of those characters that I took from real life. She was someone I took from many of the pro-black females I run into. And at the end, we find out who she is, because it's like something David Carroll talks about these pro-black sisters with the natural hair. And it's a fun little climax that you definitely have to check out, because it's really, really funny. Now, after Escape from Transylvania and House of Isis, I can't, because Escape from Transylvania is the next to last book, and this one again sold very well. Yeah, I did talk about one of those pro-blacks that cost me a job, so I know pretty much about them and the tactics that they use. And I go into all of the things that pro-blacks do in House of Isis. I talk about the shaming language they use. I talk about the games that they play and the mental manipulations that they participate in House of Isis. And it's a book where you're going to learn a lot about the pro-black female and the games that she plays. Now, the current book in the Isis series, the 15th book, to my surprise, is Isis All That Glitters. Now, this one, I wanted to pay homage to comic book superheroes, and I wanted to really tell a story that made a commentary on life in New York. So in New York, we run into a lot of crazy situations and a lot of crazy things, and we see this stuff on YouTube and reality shows. So with All That Glitters, I wanted to take this bikini-clad bank robber and take us back to the old superhero story regarding bank robbers. I wanted to put a fresh take on the old bank robber story with this one. And that's where I came up with the whole concept of Golden Shine, who is supposed to be this beautiful blonde who goes out here and she's robbing banks because she likes the fame she's getting on social media. She likes the Facebook likes. She likes the YouTube likes. And she's doing all these robberies because she's this scientist who wants to go out here and get this online fame. And that's where the whole Golden Shine concept comes up from. And this book was like, it got so much positive feedback in the pre-stages that I decided to make it the adaptation for the Isis graphic novel, because a lot of the feedback I was getting on this book in the pre-publishing stages, people loved this story. And that's why I was going to use it to launch the Indiegogo for the first Isis graphic novel. And that graphic novel, again, I'm going to be launching that the around March 8th when Captain Marvel comes out, because a lot of people, they complain about Captain Marvel and they say, oh, Captain Marvel's a terrible character. Well, with the Isis character, I want to show you how you can do a heroine, how she can be powerful and she can be fun, and how the stories can be relatable to readers. And one of the things that I did to make the character relatable to readers was I started exploring story models. And when I see with most superheroines, what they do is they make the story models very weak. And what they do is they try to apply a masculine story model to a heroine. And what happens is when you try to explore a masculine story model to a heroine, the readers just don't relate to the character. And something I learned writing romance novels, because one of the agents who I was trying to work with, who turned me down, she told me that you have to make a heroine like a best friend. You have to make them somebody you are relatable to. And that's where I came up with the whole goddess next door concept for the character. I wanted to make her a girl next door. I wanted to make her a friend, and I wanted to make her relatable to young Black girls and the experience of young Black girls. So that's where I came up with the whole goddess next door concept on the Isis character. And that's where I got the idea for the whole concept of this whole goddess next door. I wanted her to be like what Superman was and Supergirl was, like a friend, but she was going to be a friend to the black community. And as a friend to the black community, that's why she takes on people like your priestess Anjara, or she goes out here and helps people. And that all goes back to the philosophy Eastine told us about going where she's needed and helping those where she's needed, like she helped Lilith in Night of the Vampires, and helps others, like when she's helping the police with the whole Golden Shine, the blonde bikini-clad bank robber. So that a lot of that went into the character and the character's development. And other inspirations I got from the character also came from a lot of different actors that I saw. As everybody knows, Sally Richardson Whitfield is the inspiration for Eastine, and there are other actors who inspired other characters. Samuel L. Jackson is the inspiration for Osiris, and Angela Bassett is the inspiration for Queen Isis. So those were the actors and actresses that inspired some of the characters. And the original Isis was originally inspired by Halle Berry, but then later on, as I started writing the voice, I started hearing more of a Tia Mowry in the character. So whenever I'm writing the narration, these days I use Tia Mowry's voice for Isis's voice. And I often, again, try to use different actors for the speech and narrative. So whenever I'm writing the Isis characters and I'm writing different narration, whenever I'm writing Eastine, it's always Sally Richardson's voice that I'm always imagining. Or whenever I'm writing Osiris, I'm thinking of Samuel L. Jackson. Or when I'm writing Queen Isis, I think of Angela Bassett. And sometimes I think of different actors. Like for Horus, I always think of Shamar Moore. I always think of his voice when I'm writing Horus. And Horus makes appearances here and there, but I like to use him a little bit more. But he's kind of fun. But have I heard of Mega Man? Yeah, I've heard of Mega Man. It came out when I was a teenager back in the 80s. That was one of the original Nintendo Entertainment System games. I've heard of Mega Man, but those are some of the things that inspire the Isis character. And what I wanted to do with the Isis character was really, again, with the character, I wanted to give girls that black heroine that we have not seen in comics, even throughout all these eras. Like we didn't see them with Wonder Woman's era. We got Nubia. But in the Marvel, we got Captain Marvel. But again, we don't really get the development. We really don't get the exploration of black history. We don't get the exploration of black culture. And I wanted to do those things. I wanted to explore Egyptian mythology. I wanted to explore black history. I wanted to explore black culture. And I wanted to make a commentary on the black family using the Egyptian gods. And that's what I wanted to do overall with the Isis character and her family and supporting cast. I wanted to show that the character, came from this family that was similar to the family many young black girls had come from, because a lot of kids, they grew up in single mother households. They don't know who their father is in some cases. And I wanted to show kids that, there are a lot of the fathers are out there. They love their kids. They want to be a part of their family, and they want their part of the story told. And that's something that people want to see. But a lot of times these publishers, they don't want to publish that story because it, one, doesn't fit the narrative that they have for media. And they don't want to do it because they don't think it fits right. Thank you, Bombor. I like doing the Kamala Harris video because it had to be told, because I don't want to see people get taken advantage of by this Kamala Harris, because Kamala Harris is just Barack Obama in a skirt, and Barack Obama gave no hope and no change to people. I didn't know, Supremo, that Reggie Hudlin was trying to do that with Storm, but there aren't enough black writers. That's definitely true. But when it comes down to black writers, there aren't that many in comics, because a lot of times they just can't get in the door. It's like I tried to get in the door for over 20 years try to get into the door at comics. I wanted to be a comic book writer ever since the 1990s, about 91, 92, and I couldn't get in the door. And that's the reason why Isis is a series of paperbacks like this and not an actual comic book. Originally, again, Isis was meant to be a comic book way back in the 1990s. I originally planned for Isis to be a comic book, and I'm hoping that I can finally take the character into the medium I originally planned her to be in back this year when I do the Indiegogo. And I originally, again, wanted this to be a comic book that would give Black girls that heroine, because I always, again, felt it was a real sad thing. We didn't get a Black heroine during the Milestone era. I mean, we got Hardware, we got Icon, we got Static. And what they did to Rocket, I always felt was completely egregious, because in the second issue of Icon, what happened with Rocket was you had Rocket, who was in the book, but then what they did was they made her into a single mother. And I was really disgusted with that, because you had this great dynamic between Icon and Rocket. You had this great relationship between Icon and Rocket. And then they just made her into this, they made her pregnant, and it derailed the character as I saw it. I saw it as a character who had a lot of potential, a character who could have been somebody great, but they just didn't. They just did that, and it just really derailed the character, because she could have been someone she had a very interesting story, and they just wound up messing up that character. She could have been as big as Static as I saw it, but Milestone just made that mistake, and because they did that, they didn't have a heroine to carry their books. And I always saw it as you want to have a heroine in the books as well, to show that there are girls who want to be heroes too. And with the Isis character, I wanted to show that it was possible for us to have a Black heroine who could go out here and do things fighting the bad guys, but then fight the bad guys in their own way. I might pick up that Justice League versus Fatal 5 DVD. I saw the trailers for it, and it looks very good. It looks very promising. One of the reasons I want to pick it up is because it's got the classic DC designs and the classic characters. So I may pick that one up. Plus, it's got Mr. Terrific in a major role. So that's a reason why I would definitely go pick that one up. From what I saw in the trailer with Bruce Timm being involved, it's going to be it looks like a really good one. So I'm definitely going to see that one. But with the Isis character, I really wanted to give everyone that heroine that I did not see, because when it comes down to heroine, Black heroines, we don't really get that much depth. We don't get that much dimension. And that's what I wanted to do with that character, was show you, again, that you could have a strong Black heroine, but show it in a way that play to the positive strengths of Black women. Because, again, when it comes down to many of these comics, they often come from a male story model. And what I wanted to do with the Isis series was show you a female story model where we get to see the strengths of women, which is internal, as related to their internal character and their integrity as a woman. And I wanted to show that a story paradigm featuring a woman from an internal story model could work. And because there's a difference between a male hero and a heroine, and a villain and a villainess. So because when you have a heroine, she's, again, coming from an emotional standpoint, and she's also coming from a different set of mission. Her mission, usually it comes from a different set of things. I mean, male heroes, their whole thing is about protecting people from one aspect, but women come from it from a completely different aspect. And with Isis, I wanted to show how she wanted to protect people from the aspect of teaching culture and protecting those around her from that aspect. Whereas men, they want to protect people from, world challenging threats. Whereas Isis deals with things like stalkers, or she deals with personal issues, or she deals with image issues. So I was dealing with things from a woman's perspective in the story. And with the villains, I wanted to show that as it relates to women, the relationship is very different. Now, something I learned from Buffy and Xena, watching them over the years, is that when it comes down to villainesses and their relationship with a heroine, they don't want to, win by beating the person. when it comes down to women, it's a lot more emotional and it's a lot more personal. And they want to hurt someone. And what they mean by hurting someone is not physically injuring someone like the way a male hero would do. Because a male hero, they would want to kill an individual to win. Whereas a hero in a villainous situation, like in Wrath of the Cyber Goddess, Rahima wanted to humiliate Isis, and she did that in the Beauty Myth, where she wanted to humiliate her. And when it comes down to women, they want to emotionally hurt you. So they want to hurt somebody in the way that they hurt them, in a way that prevents, in the way to their feelings. So when you're dealing with heroines, this is something that they want to do. Like Amari wanted to hurt Isis in Amari's Revenge, and she wanted to hurt her because she was getting more attention from the prince and the boys in the king's court, and she wanted that attention for herself. So she wanted to hurt Isis, and she also wanted to kill Isis so she could be the center of attention. So when it comes down to women, their whole motivations are completely different than men, and this is something I am still not seeing in Marvel comics like Captain Marvel, where we have her sitting there talking from a feminist perspective about misogyny and taking on, like there was one called Nuclear, where she's taking on this nuclear man. And she said she was taking him on from the point of misogyny and proving her female superiority. And that book fell completely apart because it just does not fit what men want to see in a woman. What men want to see in a woman is softness. They want to see beauty. They want to see, attractive woman, but they want to see her protecting things that are related to women. So I have never read Watchmen, and I've never seen, I don't know anything about it. I may take a look at it. Everybody talks about Watchmen, but with Isis, I wanted to do was show you how women do things differently as a heroines, because I use a completely different story model than what they use for characters like your Kamala Khan, Ms. Marvel, your Squirrel Girl, your Captain Marvel. And what I want to do is, again, focus on the strengths of women and the beauty of women. And I want to do stories that show you how women are strong internally. And yeah, that's where they did mess up with Carol Danvers Supremo. They focus on her gender and just don't focus on her being a female. And that goes back to something I talked about in many of my videos about the difference between creating a black character and a character who is black. Because when you're creating a black character, all you're doing is focusing on the skin tone and the ideas that are related to the skin tone, and that allows you to create stereotypes. But when you create a character who is black, we already have the foundation of them being black, but then the content of their character is what comes out. And with Isis, I always focus on, here we go with the trolls. Okay. But with these SJW characters, they focus on the character, they focus on just the ethnicity, or they focus on things that's related to skin tones and stuff like that. And it leads to a very shallow reading experience. But whenever I write characters, I focus on the character being the character first, and then the ethnicity is like secondary. So you get a richer, more multidimensional character. So that's one of the things I focus on when I'm writing characters is I don't want the character to just be a black character. I want to create a character who is black, so we see the content of their character and not just the color of their skin. And that's why SJW comics are so bad, is because they focus just on the color of a person's skin or their gender, and instead of just giving us a rich, multi-dimensional story featuring a great character. And that's one of the things I try to focus on when I'm writing. So that's one of the things that I'm seeing with comics these days as related to heroines, is that they're not really, they're trying to push heroines in comics. Like with Marvel, they've been pushing Captain Marvel 6, 7 times already. They've rebooted her. Unfortunately, what happened with Captain Marvel is they just don't know how the story model works. They don't understand that when you're writing a heroine, it's a completely different story model. It's a completely different approach. And that's something I learned with writing heroines. And that's something I learned reading, because I read a lot of women's fiction in order to learn how to write things like romance novels or women's fiction, like The Thetas, a book I did about Black sororities. And that was something I learned, and I wanted to incorporate that into comics. And it was kind of a blessing that I wasn't able to really do the ISIS series back in 2002, because I learned so much over the last 10 years that I was able to learn how to write a better a better story model. And we have another troll. It's like lunchtime and the trolls just come out. Yeah, we're having trolls just get in the way, and they want to argue and present foolishness. I guess it's lunchtime and they have nothing else to do with themselves. But when I look at the model, they keep trying to apply the same model, but not understanding you need a different story. And that's another thing, again, I learned from women's fiction, I learned from manga, is that it's a completely different model. And if you want to create a heroine that's relatable to men and women, you have to use a completely different story model. And they don't really understand this. You cannot use a male story model on a heroine and then expect success. And this is why Marvel keeps hitting the wall, and even DC to a point keeps hitting the wall, is they're still trying to use this male story model instead of trying to play to the strengths of what are strong to women and what makes women attractive to men. Because your core audience for when it comes down to books like Isis and Easting, it's going to be primarily men, because men are the ones who read a lot of fantasy and science fiction. And I didn't hear that much about Goblin Slayer. What happened with that? Your core audience is going to be men, because when I do Isis series books, my core audience usually is men, and the secondary audience is women. I mean, certain books, like I did, like All About the Goddess, which was a mystery, that got a lot of female readers, and certain other books, they've gotten a lot of female readers. I remember Beauty Myth got a lot of female readers, and I've seen parts of Kill Bill, because parts of Kill Bill, Go-Go, she inspired the designs for the manga girls in Samurai Goddess. So I saw the part with Go-Go Yubari, and I saw that on YouTube, but I haven't seen all of Kill Bill. But that was one of the inspirations for part of Samurai Goddess's cover, was Go-Go Yubari on Kill Bill. If you notice one of the girls holding a meteor hammer, that was, again, a homage to Quentin Tarantino's Kill Bill. Yeah, the industry also, yeah, Supremo, they have to understand that not every female is into the same books, and that's another mistake that they make. Okay, we got another troll. I'm gonna have to some people have too much time on their hands and they cannot understand an intelligent conversation. So what was I was talking about? Yeah, I was talking about Kill Bill and how it influenced. Yeah, they come around lunchtime, so that's what they do. They have too much time on their hands. They have too much time on their hands. And if I was sitting there talking about black women and bashing, they would be here all over. I mean, but with that cover again, that's where I got one of the influences, and people noticed it almost immediately. They would look at Samurai Goddesses and go, "Oh wait, that's from Kill Bill." But that's where I got the idea from. That's where the manga girls' outfits come from, and I draw again a lot of ideas from some movies. I draw some from different things, and that's what makes the ISIS series fun. I try to make the stories relatable to kids of today, but I try to make the stories where they're accessible by anyone of all ages. Because when it comes down to the ISIS series, I always try to keep the content PG. It's family centered, it's family friendly. You can give these books to your kids. And the whole concept of ISIS, again, I wanted to make it something that little black girls, so they could have a heroine all their own, a heroine who wasn't a side character, a character who was a minor character in the background, or a supporting character like Storm or Captain or Monica Rambeau, Captain Marvel, or Vixen, who was just their background characters. They're not main characters, and there's a difference between a background character and a main character, because a background character, or supporting character, they don't have the depth or complexity like a main character does. A main character is one who just is in the background. The main character is one who can carry a story on their own. They can carry it from first page to the last, and they can carry that story for the whole book. Whereas a supporting character, when you try to put a supporting character, what they do is, let's see where when you have a supporting character and you try to make we had a mod, but they're not here today. So I wish I could be a mod so I could get rid of these guys. But they seem to come around 12:30 or so. I guess they're getting off lunch or their $6-7 an hour job, and they want to come here and start trouble. But a supporting character, they have only a certain amount of depth and a certain amount. They're not strong enough to carry a story on their own. All right, you want to do that? All right, Supremo's going to be modding the channel, so but a supporting character, what they are is like Jim Rhodes. He was a supporting character, and yes, he grew and developed, but when they gave him a War Machine book, he couldn't carry the book because there were elements that were not strong, that he just didn't have. And that was one of the reasons why I made a joke a while back. I said War Machine is a lame character because it's just Iron Man with a bunch of guns bolted to him, and there's no depth because Jim Rhodes is not an inventor. He's not a scientist like Tony Stark, and he can't come up with solutions like Tony Stark would in an Iron Man book. Yes, he's a great character as a fill-in for Tony Stark here and there, and he can carry maybe one issue or a couple of issues, but he cannot carry the series because he's not a main character. A main character is one who can carry an entire book. They have a different story structure. They have a different story foundation. And when you have a main character, what they can do is they can do things like come up with solutions to problems. They can do different things because Tony Stark was an inventor, and Jim Rhodes, he was a pilot, so he has a different set of skills. But Tony Stark, he could come up with all sorts of scientific solutions, and he built the Iron Man armor, whereas Jim Rhodes, he wore the Iron Man armor. So there's a big difference between the two. So we really want to have a main character, and that's one of the things I try to do when I'm doing characters like Isis and E-Steam. They are main characters, so their whole foundation is completely different than one that was structured as a supporting character. Then you just give them a book, and then they can't carry the book. So that's something a lot of writers don't really think about, but it's something I thought about when I was creating Isis and when I was creating E-Steam, because when I started doing E-Steam books, she could easily transition because she was a main character as well in the original Isis. So she could go out here and be a hero because she has, powers, skills, and abilities. I remember Jim Rhodes from Secret Wars, but I also remember him from the early issues of Iron Man in my brother's collection. I mean, those issues really, they were one of the things that really resonated with me because that was the first time I actually saw a black man in a comic book. And that was the thing that really got me really into it because I saw Iron Man. That's what made me an Iron Man fan for life, was seeing Jim Rhodes in the comic. But when I tried to pick up his books, they like War Machine, it just didn't work because he wasn't a lead character. He was interesting, but he wasn't really strong enough to lead. I read most of the Jim Rhodes Iron Man run, and I also read the second Jim Rhodes Iron Man run. And yeah, he was great in the role of War Machine. He was also great as Iron Man, but what I really didn't like about the early Iron Mans was how they had him as Scared Brother, and that really annoyed me. But they fixed that with Kaminsky and Hopgood's run. During Kaminsky and Hopgood's run, they did a great job with that. So, and that was a fun run, and I have all the issues of the Kaminsky Hopgood run, with the exception of the second War Machine appearance. That was the only one I don't have, but I bought all of those when I was in college, and those were some great books. So but it showed me the difference between a main character and a supporting character. And I remember Falcon from back when I was 4 years old in the 70s Supremo. I remember my brother had the Mego Falcon, and I never heard much about John Stewart until about the mid to late 80s. But John Stewart, as I saw, he didn't come into his own until the Justice League cartoon. That's when we started to see the character actualize his potential, was the Justice League cartoon. Because with that one, Bruce Timm did a great job of showing that John Stewart could be a very compelling character. And I always liked the John Stewart from Justice League. And that was one of the reasons why I had to have that John Stewart in my figure collection. I have the DC figures here in the back, but I haven't really gotten to arranging them just yet. But I'm getting ready to build the DC display as well. So I have the DC Universe Classics there. I'll try to show you. But I haven't gotten to really setting that one up yet. But he's a part of my DC display is John Stewart, and I usually have him up front. But that's the John Stewart I know. I know of the other one from Mosaic, and that book was hard to read, but I knew of him then. But he really didn't come into his own until Justice League. So I like the Crow too. I like Rager. I like the Crow. I read a couple of Crow comics. I also saw the Crow movie with Brandon Lee a while back, and that movie was fun to watch. But thank you, Bot Boy. Yeah, Bruce Timm gave John Stewart more of an edge. He gave him more personality. He gave him a really strong voice, and that was one of the things that made John Stewart really just stand out as a character during Justice League. And that was one of the things that really got me hooked on Justice League, because I had to wait to get the DVDs. That's not John Stewart the actor, it's John Stewart the Green Lantern. Oh, he is? I never knew that. I never knew that he was based on Louis Gossett's Officer and a Gentleman. I love that movie, Officer and a Gentleman. That one was a classic. I saw it a couple of years ago, and it's essential for you. I mean, Lou Gossett's performance is top notch in Officer and a Gentleman. Well, I've heard of Saint of Killers from Preacher. I heard of it because when my brother and I were collecting figures. Yeah, I heard of that. I've heard of that character, and I've also heard of all the Preacher stuff. I only heard of it from the DC Direct figure line. Um, oh, thank you, Smiley Man. Um, but I've heard of Preacher. I heard it's Garth Ennis's masterpiece. I haven't read it yet, but I've heard of it. This was the golden age of Vertigo when they were doing stuff like Preacher and Sandman and all these classics. I look at Vertigo now and it just makes me shake my head at what it is right now. But I remember when Vertigo was the place for alternative ideas and alternative concepts. And when I think of Vertigo, it's like I sit there and say to myself, it's just sad what it has become with these books like Border Town and Hex Wives. They are nowhere near what Vertigo used to be. I mean, I think of Vertigo and I think of things like Constantine and I think of books like that. And it's sad compared to what Vertigo was. I was thinking to myself, I've thought to myself when I did the John Haynes, the first book, I said, this could easily have been a Vertigo book. And people have told me it reminds them a lot of Constantine. And I said to myself, if you had did this John Haynes, you would have probably gotten 50,000, 60,000 sales based on the feedback I've been getting from people on that one story. So I look at that book, I was like, y'all could have did this and it could have been great. I've heard of Lucifer Morningstar. I hated what they did to him in the TV show, how they made him into this Captain Save him and they made him into this simp. But I've heard of the series and I've heard of the comics, but I hated what they did. I watched a couple of episodes, and I wish that I could have been there. I wish I could have written some Lucifer because the one I did with Temptation of John Haynes, the Keith David kind of a jerk type guy who just doesn't care about anyone. I think people would have wanted to see that more than they would have seen what they put on that TV show. So I've heard of Lucifer. I've heard of many of the Vertigo characters. I've heard of Tom Strong. But just that back in the 90s, I didn't have the money to buy these comics. And the only way I heard of most of them was from Wizard. And that's where I got my ideas partially for the Isis character and starting and designing the foundations of the character's concept and the ideas for the character. I got them from things that I saw, again, with the whole Bad Girls thing of the 90s. And I also got it from that conversation at the dinner table where we were sitting there talking about the lack of black heroines. And that's where I started doing the work again in the 90s with the Isis character and the Isis series. But I wasn't able to really do anything until 2012 where I had, again, I finally had some resources. And then for the Isis 10th anniversary, I launched Amari's Revenge. And again, it was a blessing that I was able to do it then because I had learned how to become a much better writer. I had learned a lot more skills as a writer. I learned things about story models and story paradigms. And these were all things I learned reading different books like what I have here. When I read things like Origin of Marvel Comics in depth. So I read Origins of Marvel Comics, Son of Origins, Bring On the Bad Guys, and about 2010, 2011, I picked up Superhero Women from Stan Lee. So this is one of the parts, the core of what I was learning as I was evolving as a writer. And the other thing that I learned about writing, I learned from something my best-selling author friend told me. She talked to me about Robert McKee's story. Now, this is an essential book if you want to learn how to write really good stories. And this is a book about screenwriting, but I apply a lot of screenwriting techniques in my novels and in my comic scripts, like the one I did for All About Glitters. So I use a lot of screenwriting techniques because in screenwriting, you have to tell the most story with the fewest amount of words. And this is something a lot of comic writers have to do because when you're writing comics, you have to really condense the story where you're telling the most story in the fewest amount of words, but you have to actually concentrate the story further because when you're doing screenwriting, Um, you have to tell a few amount of words, but with comics, you have to condense that story into a single panel image. So that's like story concentrated or story distilled. So with a book like Robert McKee's story, and I think it's in there, Sid Field's screenplay. I think it's, no, that's not it. I'll dig it out of the box another time, but I have Sid Field's screenplay, and both of those books helped me develop my story writing style, which is a hybrid between the novel and the screenplay. And I use what is short prose paragraphs with dialogue, and that style, when you read it, it reminds a lot of people of comic books, and that's one of the things that I try to draw on is comic books. That's where my style of storytelling comes from, is comic books, because ever since I was 9 years old, I always wanted to write comics. I always wanted to be a part of the comic book game business, and I couldn't draw very well. As you can see from the drawings I did earlier, I couldn't draw very well, and you can see that in many of the covers I do. I'm not that great of an artist, but I can draw a picture with words, and that's something I learned to do ever since I was 9 years old. And that's something that a lot of people, when they read my stories, they say that some of them say my stories are like comics. Other people say my stories are like movies. And that's what I want you to do. I want you to imagine it in your head. And Bill, when he draws it, it's literally like ideas taken straight out of the things that I see in my imagination. Like this scene in All About Glitters, this scene, Bill drew it straight from what things that I gave him. I gave him a storyboard and I gave him model sheets, and he literally took this image, and it's like something taken right out of what I imagined in my head, and he brought it to life. And that's one of the reasons why I like working with Bill Walker, is he takes images that I do, and he makes images that literally look like something out of my imagination. So something like Bride of Dracula, this was, again, an image I came up with, and he just made it come to life, and it makes it look like something straight out of something I see right out of my head. It's like straight out of my imagination and the way I would see it in my head. And that's why I like working with him, is that all the covers he does look just like anything that I would do. And that's one of the reasons why I want to work with him on the ISIS graphic novel, is I wanted to give you thank you, Supremo. I incorporated social media into the All That Glitter story, because a lot of teenage kids and young adults, they are on social media all the time. They're on Facebook, they're on YouTube, they're on Instagram, and I wanted to make a commentary on how people use social media, and how that would be a motivation for someone to go out here and commit crimes. So I wanted to make a commentary on what a woman would do, because I know a lot of women, this is why they become so-called Instagram models, and they become into things like making all these twerk videos. So I wanted to make that commentary because it was relatable to today. And that was something that I took from Stan Lee, because Stan Lee, when he would do stories that were relatable to today, because for him, Marvel was supposed to be the world outside your window. And this is what I saw going outside. I would go outside, I would say, hey, this is something I've seen on reality TV. This is something I see on social media. And I decided to make it Golden Shine's motivation, for going out here and being this bikini-clad bank robber. Now, I also did that in an E-Steam series story as well. This story, Little Girl Lost, this one was another story I took from the real world. And this story was partially inspired by what I had seen with a lot of kids who are being ignored by their parents. They want to go out and do things, but their parents are too busy working. And I took with Little Girl Lost was the whole story of the girl wanted to go see the Frozen movie, and her parents were too busy, so she decided to go out on her own. And then E-Steam goes out here. She sees this little girl by herself and then tries to protect her, because her phone gets snatched by one of these robbers out here, and then Eastine gets her phone back, and she tries to help the girl who was lost find her way home. Now, this one was also, because the story is set in Times Square, was taken from my experience going down to Times Square. So I went downtown to take a package for one of my family members to the UPS store when it was in Toys R Us in Times Square. And I saw these topless women, and I also saw the guys in the costumes. And then I read about them fighting each other. And that was what inspired me to do Little Girl Lost, because I saw how Times Square, while it had changed, was still a very rough place, and how a little girl who gets lost, she gets exposed to all of this craziness, and then Eastine gets caught up in all the craziness in Times Square. So that story and All That Glitters, they were taken from real world, real life experiences, and they were taken from real world things that I saw going on. So, and Rage here, I also make a commentary on World Star and Amari's Revenge, because in part of Amari's Revenge, Isis gets her shirt torn off in a fight between herself and Amari, and it winds up on World Star Hip Hop. And I make a jab at that, and that's another thing that I do with the Isis series, is I try to keep it relevant to today and things kids relate to today. And in Amari's Revenge, Isis gets her shirt torn off by Amari in the ensuing cat fight they have in the museum after Amari comes back to life. And then after she has the fight with Amari, what happens is Osiris admonishes her about being on World Star Hip Hop. And that was one of the most hilarious things you'll ever read in Amari's Revenge, is the scene where the father just sits there and he admonishes her about winding up on World Star Hip Hop. And he says it's embarrassing even for beings like us to be on World Star Hip Hop. So I draw from real life stuff when I'm doing Isis series stories. It's not just, basic fantasy and action and adventure. It's fantasy relatable to people of today and the life of people of today. So that I draw a lot from people's experiences in the stories, and I try to make the stories relatable to girls of today, and I try to make them relatable to everyday life that people are going on right now. And again, I draw that from what I read when I was reading Origins of Marvel Comics, and I was reading things as related to Stan Lee and how he got stories from Marvel Comics. And that's one of the things that, again, I use in my foundation for my own writing, and I use for my own storytelling, is I try to draw from those real world experiences and real world things so that people will be able to say, hey, that character is just like me. That character is having experiences like me. That character is struggling like me. That character has problems like me. And that character could be me. And that's one of the things I want people to do with the Isis characters. I want them to identify with the character. I want them to relate to the character. And I want them to see that they can be a goddess just like Isis, and they can be a goddess next door who helps out people in the community in the way that Isis helps out people in the community. And I want them to see that they can be a hero in the exact same way, and that that you can be a person who helps out in your community. Because as I saw it, when it comes down to superheroes, we've really gotten so far away from what a superhero was and what a superhero was supposed to represent. Because I remember when I was a kid, a superhero was a guy who was connected to the community, was a part of the community, and made every effort to serve the community. But with today's comics, everybody is so far away from what a hero is that we're getting far from it, because we have these big, long storylines that are these year-long events. And instead of us having a hero who is there every day in the community, what we have now are these big, long, epic storylines that are supposed to be world-shattering, like your Civil Wars, and they're all dark and gritty, and nobody really relates to those stories because they don't see themselves in the story. And with stories like what I want to do with the Isis All That Glitters is show you how Isis is a person in your community, how she's a goddess next door, how she's a friend, and how she's there for you, and how she's there to help you out. And I try to show you that in stories like All About the Goddess, where she's literally willing to go to this art studio and be a model in the studio to help this woman, the Marilyn Marie, deal with this campus stalker. Or a story like Samurai Goddess, where she helps out this college student who is being targeted by the manga girls. And I wanted to show how she was a part of the community, how she wants to help people out and, get people back to what superheroes are all about. Because superheroes they have gone off the rails as I see it. When you look at superheroes, they are no longer about helping other people or serving other people. It's all about them. And that's what's really sad about the whole genre of superheroes, is that it's all about them. And it shouldn't be all about them. It should be about what they can do for others and what they can do to help others, because that's what a superhero is supposed to be all about. A superhero is supposed to be someone who has this great power, but then wants to use that power to help other people in the community and enrich the quality of their lives. And we're not getting that in comic books these days. And that's something I wanted to contribute to comics with the ISIS character if I ever got the chance to do actual comics. But I wound up having to do, YA books, because I learned more about trade publishing, because it's easier to get into trade publishing than it is to get into the comic book industry. And yeah, I never watched Afro Samurai or Samurai Jack, because I never had cable, because I was broke for a good 15, 20 years, and it was hard for me to get jobs, and it's hard for me to get full-time work. So I wasn't able to watch any of those. I was only able to, and it's hard to find them on YouTube, because what happens is whenever you put a cartoon on YouTube, they take it right down. But I would have watched it if I had a chance, but I don't have cable. But I don't have those channels now on Fios, but they run them on Fios right now. But I'll try to check it out if I can find Afro Samurai and Samurai Jack. But when it comes down to the ISIS series, I wanted to get back to, back to basics, old school storytelling. Okay, I can check Dailymotion. That's where I found Danny Phantom, of all characters. I found Danny Phantom over there. And I found Danny Phantom on Dailymotion. I'm hoping that maybe I can find Afro Samurai and Samurai Jack. But when it comes down to the ISIS character, I wanted to give you that, get us back to old school superheroes, good guys, bad guys, heroes helping out in the community, helping out others, and trying to serve people in the community. Because what I see is we don't have a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man anymore. We don't have a Superman who, is the man of steel and goes out to help people anymore. And that's really sad. I mean, I wanted to see superheroes like I saw back in the day, but we're not getting that anymore. What we're getting these days are a lot of long storylines that go on forever. We have superheroes who just spend more time fighting and infighting with their rogues, rather than trying to help out people in the community and having those human stories like they used to. I mean, those stories, like I did, I did All About the Goddess, Samurai Goddess, and with the upcoming All That Glitters, they were more, or not All That Glitters yet, because it's not out yet. But I mean, it is out in paperback, and you can get the paperback of All That Glitters, but the ebook isn't out yet. And you can pre-order the ebook by going to my page. But the whole thing is that I want to see more heroes just being out here and doing basic stuff like bank robberies. But a lot of comic writers and a lot of comic editors, they'll sit there and think, oh, that story is so stupid. But it's not stupid. It's something that we all need to see, because in order for us to care about superheroes and see them as people we want to go out and buy their adventures, we need to see how they relate to us and how they relate to our community. So when I look at comics and they do all these earth-shattering world events, they just wind up disconnecting people from comics, and they wind up disconnecting people from the story because they don't see themselves in the story. So with Isis, what I wanted to do was show how, as a goddess next door, she's serving the community, she's helping the community, she's helping people in the community, and has a connection to us, because that's something we really want to see in, comics. And that would give people incentive to go out and buy comics, because right now I look at comics, that's a very insular environment, and it's all the heroes having their fights among themselves, similar to what Mark Waid talked about in Kingdom Come. Sorry, I'm holding it upside down. But Mark Waid talked about in Kingdom Come, and the great irony of things is that comics now look more like Kingdom Come than look like, what they looked like back in the Silver Age and the Modern Age, where we saw heroes helping people. Instead, they're just spreading themselves. And again, it goes back to a point I talked about. Well, one of the things that inspired me to write Isis was, again, how the heroes became lost because there was nobody there to give them guidance and support. Yeah, that was true, Supremo. Back in the day, Avengers took on these world-shattering events, but it only took 3 issues. But these days, it's like a year and a half. I remember the Kang storyline from 2001 that Kurt Busiek did. It was like 15, 16 issues. I was like, this is meandering. You need to cut this down to maybe 3 issues. But that was the thing that led to the entire Avengers series getting derailed, along with Disassembled on the second reboot in 2001. And that Kang storyline just went on forever, and it just wound up turning people away from that comic. So as I see it, a story needs to be done in maybe 2-3 issues tops. And then one of the things I do with the Isis series is like these books where they're supposed to be like 2-3 issue arcs. If they were comics, they would be 2-3 issues tops. And that was one of the things I wanted to do. And in addition to the organic events like Wrath of the Cyber Goddess, where they're not a crossover event, but they're an internal event, and it's a milestone moment that people can say, oh, this is an event that happened, and they have a reason to go buy that book because it's a milestone for that character. It's a milestone event. And that's one of the things that I remember Fourth Age talking about comics not being collectible, because none of the events really connect with each other. None of the milestones connect with each other. And because none of the milestones connect, you have no reason to go buy back issues, and then you have no reason to go out here and move forward, because everything isn't collectible anymore, and the books are they're going to be rebooted again. And yeah, Bendis came on after Jeff Johns, and Jeff Johns' Avengers, he was the one who came up with the whole Henry Pym and having with that sex scene that really just didn't have a place and wasn't appropriate. So that was a storyline that was one that turned me off. That Kang storyline, Jeff Johns, and then Disassembled, it totally derailed Avengers and that second reboot and prevented it from moving forward, because that series was going strong with Kurt Busiek and George Perez, but then they decided to bring out all this stuff, and then it just derailed the entire book. That Kang storyline was the start of it, because it just went too long, and that was one of the reasons why Avengers just went off the rails. Jeff Johns' Avengers it just didn't work. They brought him on after JSA, but he couldn't find his footing. And then they went and they Disassembled and brought in Bendis, and Bendis gave us street heroes because he doesn't know how to write superheroes. So that was the big problem with that run of Avengers, and that's why the book has been in trouble ever since. Because when it comes down to Marvel, what happened was, after, again, those creators left, Kurt Busiek, Sean Chen, George Perez, all those people left, that's when Marvel went into free fall yet again, because Marvel's big problem was they didn't have a strong editorial to manage Marvel, and they didn't have a strong editorial to lead Marvel. So what they needed was, they need a leader in editorial to lead them, and they need someone to guide the brand so that it can grow. So that's where they need it, but they still just don't have that person. And what they need again is someone with publishing experience, because a person with publishing experience, they can come in and do something to lead the brand and help it move forward, because that's what Marvel really needs. That's what DC really needs, is a publishing professional, because this person, they understand, about core audiences. They know about lead books. They know about front list, mid list, and back list. And looks like, I don't know if this is a troll. They're writing something in Korean. I don't know. But you need a strong leader who can lead the brand and manage the brand. I don't know what language it is. We might have to, I don't know. Yeah, I think we're gonna have to get this guy. It's Korean. I don't know what he's saying. I think we're gonna have to get rid of them, because I don't know. They're not saying anything in English. But you need a strong publishing professional, and that's something I've learned over the last 10 years, just publishing SJS Direct books, is how the publishing business works, how the marketing works, how the distribution works, how the audience works. And that's something that's something that I learned over the last, decade, just learning. Yeah, you're going to have to get rid of him, Supremo, because I don't, he's just publishing, he's just writing babble. But a publishing professional can tell you things about, books and marketing before you even put out the concept. If you pitch the concept to them, they're going to start asking you critical questions like, what audience is this book for? What customers? What's up, Adam? They're going to ask you critical questions like, what audience is this book for? And Marvel doesn't have that person working for them right now. They need somebody who can. What are my opinions of Joe Quesada and Tom Brevoort? I think Tom Brevoort has worn out his welcome at Marvel. He's gone as far as he can go, and he's just angry and frustrated. And it's just time for him to move on. Joe Quesada was in over his head way back in 2001 when they made him an editor-in-chief. He just does not have the publishing experience to understand the business of publishing. He's a comic artist. He's not a businessman. He does not have a business background like I do, because I have a degree in business. I've worked in the publishing business for over 10 years. So when I look at Joe Quesada, he just is a guy who's way over his head, doesn't really know the business of publishing. He knows drawing comics and superheroes, but he just doesn't understand that when you go out here and spend money on a book, you have to really make sure that that book is going to pay off in the end. Yeah, I did know that there were black samurais in feudal Japan, Devon, and that's one of the reasons why I wrote Isis Samurai Goddess, because Isis's background, when she was living in Japan for over 800 years, she learned how to become a samurai. So that's all part of her martial arts background. So I took that from Japan, and that's one of the things I knew about. I knew about there were black samurais in Japan, and there were black people in Japan. There were dark-skinned people in Japan, and that's something that I would have loved. I want to explore in another ISIS story and talk about the black people who lived in Japan, the dark-skinned people in Japan, and that's something that is part of ISIS's story, is that she was a samurai back in Japan, and that's where she learned the martial arts. And yeah, Joe Quesada, he was just an artist, and he didn't understand the importance of editorial, because it's editorial that gives the writer's guidance. It's the editorial that gives the artist's guidance. And you really can't self-edit, because I do self-editing, and usually I'm not that good of an editor, because sometimes when you're trying to self-edit, sometimes you are a little emotionally attached to a character, and that prevents you from developing them. And that's something I learned how to work out But you really, when you have an editor there, you have that second set of eyes to give you guidance, give you an understanding of things, and really give you a fresh perspective, which is the reader's perspective on characters. So you may think that, what story do you want to catch up on, Adam? But the whole thing is that when you have an editor there, they can sit down and talk to you and tell you why this doesn't work, or what you're doing, what this approach to story doesn't work. And they can sit down and give you that guidance. And Marvel, we really don't have, really hard editors out here to give people guidance and give them the support that they need. Now, you can pick up Isis Samurai Goddess straight. You don't need to pick up any prior books, because this is every Isis series story is self-contained in one volume. So if you want to pick up this story, you can just pick this story up and and you won't be lost at all. You can just pick it up, because every story in the Isis series is an entry point. So Adam, you're not going to have a problem. This story, everything that you need to know is in the story. And this story, it takes place after Bride of Dracula. You can come right in. And a lot of people have picked up Samurai Goddess without even reading another Isis series book. And that's the beauty of the Isis series, is that you can pick up any book, like old school Marvel. You could pick up any book and just start reading. Again, I've had people come in from this, like books like they've come in from All About the Goddess. They've come in from Escape from Transylvania. They've come in from, let me see. Okay. They've come in from Wrath of the Cyber Goddess. They've come in from Bride of Dracula. But you can just come in from any book. And I've had people come in from those books, and they would go all the way back to the first book, which is Amari's Revenge. Now, a lot of people, they don't know that Isis Amari's Revenge is the first book. Good evening, Spore Hacker. I'm glad to see you here again. He's all the way from Holland, I believe. But a lot of people, they come in from Isis. They come in when they don't even know Amari's Revenge is the first book, but they come in from later books, and then they pick up the entire run. And that's what I learned from guys like Jim Shooter, is that you can just come in from any book, and you can move backwards or you can move forwards. And that was part of the business model I designed for the Isis series and SJS Direct Universe books, is that you could just pick up any book, and then you could just go backwards for the back issues, or you can move forward. And the whole thing with the business model is that I designed it so that as a publisher, I could continue to produce the back issues, so that, the Ainu, what are they? Those are the female samurai, are they? Thank you. Thanks, Adam. Thanks for buying Samurai Goddess. It's also available in paperback too. It's in paperback and Kindle. And yeah, but you can buy any book out there, and there's no problem. And I got that from comics and the comics business model. And in the comic business model, usually the comic shops make the money on the back issues. But with mine, I wanted to show how a publisher could make money on the back issues. They weren't female samurai. What were they? But I read about female samurai as part of Isis's backstory, and I wanted to incorporate that into the character's backstory. She was a female samurai. She was taught by a female master, and that's also something I talk about in the first Isis book, about her being taught by they're the original people of Japan. And yeah, they were dark skinned, and that's something nobody talks about either. Yeah, the dark skinned people of Japan. So I want to do that in another Isis series story where I talk about her history in ancient in Japan. Yeah. But I want to go in depth on that in a future story. Because there were dark-skinned people in Japan. There still are dark-skinned people in Japan. And nobody wants to talk about that because it doesn't fit the narrative that people have. Yeah, Supremo. There were female samurai, so I read about them in depth. Excuse me, sinuses. And that was part of ISIS's backstory. And I plan on going in more in depth about it in a future story. But right now, I'm just trying to get things going for the first ISIS graphic novel on Indiegogo, and I'm also trying to launch the next ISIS series book, All That Glitters, which is now available in paperback, and it's also going to be available on Kindle Unlimited. And several of the ISIS series books right now, they are available oh, that's interesting. They're available on Kindle Unlimited right now, like Bride of Dracula, House of ISIS, Escape from Transylvania. They're all available on Kindle Unlimited. So if you want to try some ISIS series books like those, An Imitation of Life is also available. You can try those if you want to try them for free. But the ISIS series books, they are very affordable. I designed it, again, to cost as much as 2 comic books. So one ISIS series book, usually if it's the short arcs like these, they're like $8. So you can get 2, it's like the price of 2 comics. And you're getting 2 comics worth of story from where I was in the old days, where you got a lot of story versus exposition. Whereas like a larger book, like, let me see. What did I do with Escape from Transylvania? Okay, whereas a larger book like Escape from Transylvania or Night of the Vampires or House of ISIS, it's going to cost a little more because it's got 3 issues worth of story or 4 issues worth of story. So that's something that I do. I try to price the books so that anybody can be able to afford them. Whereas, again, Escape from Transylvania, this book is going to cost a little more because it has it's like over 100 pages. Like All About the Gods is like over 100 pages, or Night of the Vampires. These are the longer ones, but these are like 3 to 4 issue arcs if they were comics. And the other ones, again, are 2 issue arcs. So I always try to price them so that anybody can be able to afford them. And with the ebooks, I try to price them like comic book prices because, again, Wednesday is comic book day. Everybody goes out and they buy their comics today. So I usually try to launch them around Tuesday or Wednesday so that people who like comics can go out and buy them. And again, every story is accessible. Every story is an entry point. And I make it where you can pick up any ISIS series book and just be able to either move backwards towards the backstories or forwards towards the new stories. And every book that I write, again, features all the books in the back, so you have you can see where you have to start, and you can see where everything starts, and you can go from there and learn and pick up all the back books. So I try to make it accessible for everyone because everybody talks about how comics aren't accessible, but with ISIS stories, I try to make them accessible. Were they only in Japan? I don't know. The original indigenous people of Japan. I'd have to do some more research on that, but I try to make every book accessible. And with the ISIS graphic novel that I'm coming up, it's going to be, again, self-contained in 1 volume. You'll be able to just read the story straight. And if you want to move forward and pick up ISIS series books, if we get it funded, you can move forward from there with the books, or you can move with the new books that are going to be coming up, or you can move back to the old stories. I'm going to get ready to wrap it up in about 10 minutes. I'm going to get ready to wrap up the stream in about 10 minutes. And if you guys have any questions, you can ask me any questions, and I'll try to answer them in the last 10 minutes. So, oh. Okay. I'm gonna try to wrap this up soon, because I got some other stuff to do. But with the ISIS series, again, I wanted to make something that anybody could get into. I wanted to make a series that young girls could have, that positive black heroine that I wanted to see in comics. Oh, thank you very much, Adam. Thank you for the donation. Every dollar you guys give me, I appreciate. And I see every dollar as having value, and I see all the support you guys give me as value. So I appreciate everything. So never think about it as not being much. And I take all the little and I turn it into a lot. So ancient Chinese were black. I did not know that. I did not know that. Mr. Superboy talks about that all the time. He talks about how all these indigenous peoples all come from us. And I have to agree with him on that point. He talks about that all the time. So he makes that point, and Devon makes the point too. He talks about how the ancient Chinese were black. So it's a good point. So again, yeah, I'm going to be doing this, trying to get this. The Indiegogo campaign is going to start, I think, March 4th. I want to do it on either the Tuesday or the Wednesday of the week Captain Marvel comes out. So the Indiegogo is going to start that week. I want to do it either Tuesday or the Wednesday, which is Comic Book Day, because again, everybody complains about Captain Marvel. They talk about how Marvel makes these terrible heroines, and what I want to do with this Indiegogo is give people a counterpoint so that they can say, okay, this is what we want in a heroine. This is what we want in an adventure featuring a heroine. And this is the story model we want to see featuring a heroine. So that's what I want to do with the ISIS Indiegogo. Oh, thank you, Nightwing. Thank you for the donation. So that's what I want to do with that. Because everybody, again, they complain about Squirrel Girl, they complain about Kamala Khan, they complain about Captain Marvel, and I want to offer something that shows people, hey, this is the story model that we need to use for success. This is the story model that will relate to readers. This is the story model that will appeal to readers. And I've had success with ISIS's story model with readers who are both men and women. And I've had success with it in the US with Black audiences and white audiences and abroad. And I've had a lot of casual readers come into the ISIS series using the story model that I've used in the ISIS series. So there is an audience for a story featuring a heroine. And what I want to do with the Indiegogo is show you a prototype for what will be successful. Oh, thank you, War Secrets. I had a great time doing the show. Supremo asked me, what are my thoughts of the DC streaming service? Well, when it comes out of the DC streaming service, I'm not really a fan of it because a lot of their adaptations aren't that great. And that's one of the reasons why I didn't want to spend any money, because their Titans, which is supposed to be their flagship, it doesn't resemble anything that I saw in the Wolfman Perez stories. So when I look at that show, it just really turned me off. And that Hooker Starfire, that was something I was just not a fan of. That's something that just does not give me an incentive to go out here and buy their streaming service. And that doesn't give me an incentive to go out here and buy their streaming service. So that's something that I really don't want to go on. See, thank you, Spore Hacker. But that's one of the, yes, Spore Hacker, that's one of the reasons why I am releasing it that week, because I really want to show people who are complaining about Captain Marvel there is an alternative. And people have been, again, complaining about Captain Marvel for years. And I want to be able to say, hey, I've got something that's going to be an alternative to Captain Marvel. I have a proven and successful story model that is different than what Marvel has been producing, what DC has been producing, something that is founded in what female readers find appealing, what male readers find appealing, and is accessible to both men and women. Because I've had, again, women who black women, white women. I've had men. They buy ISIS and they enjoy ISIS. So that's why I'm launching the Indiegogo that week, because again, everybody says that they hate Captain Marvel. So here's an opportunity for you to spend your money on an alternative comic. I'm bringing in a great artist, because the art you see on this cover from Bill Walko, that's going to be in the interiors. And everybody who has read the script loves the script. So I'm hoping everybody comes out and turns out for the ISIS Indiegogo graphic novel, because I want to work with Bill towards putting together a really great graphic novel that captures the spirit of the ISIS series and captures the spirit of my storytelling. And Bill does a great job with this on the covers. And I believe we could work together to put together a very amazing comic if we work together on this project. I think we could put together a comic that's on the level of something like Jawbreakers, or what was it called again? Cyber Frog. And I think we could put together a really fun comic that is accessible to not only comic fans, but to those casual readers out there and want to enjoy themselves. So that's the kind of comic I want to put together. And with that, I'm going to wrap up the stream. And you can pick up ISIS series books on Amazon.com. They're on Amazon.com, but they're also available in paperback on Amazon. They're also available on Barnes & Noble. Then the ebook versions of many of the books, with the exception of the more later ones like Escape from Transylvania and Bride of Dracula, these are Kindle Unlimited, so you can get them on Kindle. You can get these on Kindle right now, and you can read them for free if you have Kindle Unlimited. You can pre-order All That Glitters on Amazon, but the paperback is available now. And with that, I'm going to wrap up the stream. I'm hoping you pick up the books, and I thank you for coming and watching the stream. I'm hoping to do another stream next week, and I thank you again for supporting and watching the stream. And again, I'm hoping you pick up the books, because they're a lot of fun. They are very entertaining, and I think you're definitely going to enjoy them. Thank you for watching the stream. I'm hoping to come back next week with another one.